Good evening, friends. We're here today to talk about virtual reality, VR, and its use in opera today. Over the last several months, we have explored various technologies, including streaming, film projects, and live performances in unusual circumstances. But tonight we're going to take a look at virtual reality and how this new technology is going to define a new part of the opera medium as we go forward into the 21st century. We have some wonderful panelists today who will tell us about their projects and introduce us into some of the concepts and vocabulary. We have Anne Hiatt, who is the General Director of Opera on Tap, John Rozzoni, the General Director of Tri-Cities Opera at Binghamton, New York, Kamala Sankaram, who is a composer, performer, and multimedia creator, as well as Francesca Zambello, the Artistic Director of Washington National Opera and the General Director of the Glimmerglass Festival. They will be led in conversation by my wonderful colleague, Laura Lee Everett, who is the Chief Programs Officer at Opera America. Laura Lee has forgotten more about opera production than I will ever know, so it is entirely appropriate that I turn the session over to her. Laura Lee, take it away.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you this evening. In many ways, opera is the original multimedia art form, combining the physical arts of scenery, costumes, wigs and makeup, the visual arts of lighting and projection, and the oral art of music, instrumental and vocal. But what if you take that to the next level and add the art of the experience, creating the actual space where you interact with the art and which senses are employed to consume it? Tonight, we're going to talk with early adapters in taking opera into the digisphere, specifically in the areas of virtual reality. These groundbreaking creators will show us several projects that have utilized augmented reality, known as AR, virtual reality, known as VR, and what the difference and how all of it is that they did it. Hi, everybody. We have some images to share with you from these productions. I'm going to ask some questions to get each panelist started, and we welcome your questions and curiosity. Feel free to utilize the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and I'll get those questions asked of the panel. So let's start with a clear definition. Who wants to tackle the AR, VR, and this shiny new thing I learned about called XR, and what's the difference and what all of that means? Who wants to start? Anne, do it.
Okay, I'll start. So virtual reality is when you are technically fully immersed in a digital experience. So you're wearing a headset in which you see nothing of the outside world. Augmented reality, AR, overlays a digital reality on top of what you would normally see in a camera lens. So you can see kind of, live action environments with an overlay of a new dimension of digital reality. And then XR refers to both of those technologies. So XR is sort of short for immersive technology. So the marketing departments at these companies making it have basically been trying to figure out a way to define the industry, which is really more about immersive technology versus just virtual reality or augmented reality. So it's kind of a catch-all abbreviation for both of those technologies.
So, and are there things specifically that differ between them in terms of the technology you use to create them?
Well, AR, you can experience on smartphones or tablets, specifically. So you don't necessarily have to be in a headset to technically be experiencing augmented reality. AR is something that will also be used in headsets. That's actually a newer technology that's coming out in terms of the headset technology. There is the Microsoft, what is it? The HoloLens. Yes, HoloLens, which is about $3,000 and is an enterprise solution at this point, that has been kind of put to the fore as going to be probably the technology that will continue to advance AR headsets. And beginning next year, we'll start seeing AR smart glasses. So, kind of think of an AR, I'm sorry, like a smart watch, but it'll be here on your head,
But
and
better
hopefully
than
more
Google
fashionable.
Glass.
But better than
Yes,
Google Glass.
exactly. Hopefully.
And when you say headset, when you're not talking about earphones, you're talking about iPhones, not iPhones, but you're talking about goggles and is it oral and visual, the headset?
Most of them have some audio built into the headset. But that being said, in a lot of these designs, the visual aspect is primary. So it is only recently that they've started to upgrade the sound that is contained in the headset. But also, most of them have the ability for you to plug your own headphones in. So if you have a better quality pair of headphones, you can use those.
So you have all this gear on your head. And then what are the other, and you touched a little bit on this in terms of consumption, but I know, John, you guys did a little bit of this with Miranda. What are the platforms and the ways, like, is it something that can be consumed in 2D, in 3D, in multiple ways, even if you don't have a VR headset?
Well, when we developed our project Miranda, we were conscious sort of the idea that some of the equipment necessary for virtual reality is not accessible to everyone. So we decided to actually use a VR headset that we had strung up to a live stream on YouTube, which gave people the opportunity to watch our live virtual reality production in 2D on YouTube. But we also developed a desktop app, kind of an exe file, that allowed people to experience the virtual reality as a sort of first person shooter kind of video game. So we tried to have some broad ways to access what we were doing. And one thing I just wanted to mention, maybe the most common example of augmented reality that we're all used to is Pokemon Go, I think, right? I think, if you're familiar with that game and how that works, that's probably a really great example.
I want to turn a little bit to you, Kamala, in talking about this, because in relation to opera, this is an oral art form and how it's consumed. Talk a little bit about what's different about the way that the sound is handled, recorded, and presented in these platforms.
Well, I think one of the most exciting things about these emerging technologies is that they allow for spatial audio, 360 audio. Because as we know, one of the most exciting things about seeing a classical singer live is the way that the voice blooms at a distance and the way that the voice interacts with the architecture of the space, right? So it's not the same listening to a 2D recording simply because of the way that it has to be captured, right? You put the microphone in front of the singer and you get this one direction. And contemporary recording technologies, now we can have multiple microphones, so you can sort of simulate what it might be like in the room, but still, because the recording has to be flattened into stereo, which means you get a right or a left channel, and you can pan between those two channels, but it's not the same as having panning in the whole 360 space, which is what these technologies let you do. The engine that most VR and AR is programmed in, there are two game engines that are typically used. One is Unity and the other one is called Unreal. And both of them allow you to place sounds in a 360 environment. And they also allow for integration with stereo, binaural, and ambisonic audio setups. An ambisonic audio setup is just a microphone array that surrounds you, so it's capturing audio coming in all 360, the whole 360 field. And so it allows for a greater depth of audio experience than we can get from listening even to the best vinyl recording. And I say that as somebody who is an avid vinyl collector. Well, that's what's really exciting about it for me is, it's a way to accurately capture the experience of of being there in a hall with your favorite singer, that doesn't flatten them or EQ parts of their take parts of their voice away that really are the beauty of the voice. So I find that really just great.
That's exciting. So while you're on this, you as the creator for these works, let me ask, what, from your perspective, what was your impetus for wanting to write in the digisphere and explore these new technologies? Obviously, it's fun to experiment with new technology, and you addressed a little of this with the sound, but was it a test of opera's viability in the face of all of this? And how much does the platform you're writing for influence your creation of the story and the music?
Well, it's interesting because Miranda was actually the first piece that I ever wrote. So it's a piece that is now it premiered in 2012. So I think that it sort of captures what has always interested me about theater, which is this idea of interactivity. We go to the theater because we're there for the music, of course, but we're also there for the social experience and for the feeling of being in the room with the performers. And so this was a natural extension, and that part of what makes a VR or AR environment different is that you're immediately placed in the center of the action in a way that you're not if you're watching a proscenium piece. So that's part of it. And then I'm also excited by the potential for accessibility. If you can get to the point where you can accurately capture the experience of watching opera in a way that allows people to do that from their homes, then that means that people who can't get to an opera house, either because of the cost of tickets or simply because there isn't one near them, then that democratizes it in a way that could be a gateway for people who have not been opera lovers before to become opera lovers. So that's really at the heart of it is how do we immerse people in a way that makes them feel like they're part of the community of opera lovers, and how do we then use these technologies to reach people where they are. As far as writing for the medium, Miranda works as a VR piece because of this idea of interactivity. So even the premiere version of it was meant to be a piece with audience interaction, in that it was a jury trial. The audience is the juror, and at the end of the show, they get to vote who gets thrown into a furnace at the end. And part of what we did for that piece was a lot of world building, like deciding what are the rungs of society, what are the rules of the court trial, what are some commercials. We wrote a bunch of commercials beforehand that also made it into the Tri-Cities version. So I think that when you're thinking about how to use these technologies, it's really important to write for the medium, but also to know what the medium affords and what is the culture of the medium. So virtual reality in particular, the audience expects to be part of the experience. And that's something that I think that Tri-Cities did such a brilliant job with, is especially in the waiting room, which I think there is a link to for everybody to look at later. You can see some commercials. You can go and you can look and find these clues pinned to a wall, and then you can choose where to look. And I think in that way it's more similar to a theater experience than film, because the audience is always deciding where they're going to look. And for me as the composer, in thinking about how to make the music work when the audience is in the center of the action, it's always a question of, what is the sound source? Is it an orchestra that's floating above your head somewhere, or is it coming from actual objects in the space? So again, it's sort of a filmic way of thinking, in that you're talking about diegetic sound, which comes from objects in the space, or non-diegetic sound, which is coming from somewhere else. And then you're also using the tools of theater, which is how can sound draw your attention somewhere, especially if you have this spatialized audio. If I hear a sound coming from here, then that will make me want to look in that direction. And so sound can really be an integral part of the storytelling because it's so up close and intimate.
That's great. That the idea that the sound palette is what is really changing. So two other quick questions. How does this, your structure and building a story and collaborating with the librettist, and then knowing that you're building it into this world where you're building everything in the world too. How is that? Is that freeing? Is that restrictive? Is that just different?
It's different. I mean, I don't want to keep using the metaphor of television and film, but I think it's more like if you're building a season-long arc for a TV series, you have what's called a show Bible at the beginning, where you have to lay out who all the characters are, how do they know each other, where are we in time, what is the arc of the show going to be, because the world has to be built out in such a way that it makes sense. And really, this is video game design, right?
Yeah.
The same thing happens when you're building out a video game world, and that the world has to have its own internal rules, and it has to make sense for the story to work. And you know, that's why a lot of this work is being done on game engines. Both Unreal and Unity are used for developing video games as well as for XR experiences.
Yep. And I hope that somewhere in the middle of all of this, some people from the gaming world might trip over the floor and make their way into the Opera VR world and find some fun and joy there. So what the heck is steampunk?
So steampunk is a subculture that sort of imagines what would happen if contemporary technologies are built on steam technology instead of on digital chips. So I think examples of steampunk that people may be more familiar with are like the aesthetic of Doctor Who, or of Wild Wild West, where you have these flying trains or dirigibles or other things like that. So it's as much about the aesthetic and the costuming as it is about the rules of the world, that instead of flying in a helicopter, you'll have like an airship.
Right. It's really, it's a fun universe, and we'll come back around to that more. We'll talk a little bit more with you and John about Miranda. I wanted to take a look at some of the work that you've created in this area, just to give people a taste of it. And I thought we would start with Parksville. So let's take a look. We're going to go to a short behind the scenes video for everyone of the making of the Parksville Murders.
We're trying to kind of carve out a niche as an organization that's creating opera that's very contemporary and specific for our culture, and also has a real entertainment bent to it. As an opera company that started singing in dive bars 10 years ago, we've always kind of approached it a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I wanted to take something that's popular in our culture and apply it to the art form that I've grown up in and loved.
VR is very new, specifically cinematic VR is new. So it's a lot about experiences and, you know, being able to sort of check out new experiences that you've never had before. And the fact that this is an opera-based VR experience is very intriguing because, number one, it's musical, but it's theatrical at the same time. And not everybody's been to an opera before. This is a sort of a special case because it's actually scripted and it's a very cool setup, but it also lends itself very well to spatialized audio in general.
What is interesting to me about VR is that the sound has the potential to really surround the viewer. It was exciting for me to be able to make this sort of hybrid opera work that uses electronic elements, that uses the whole space, and that really, this is a way for people to experience opera without actually going to the opera. The power of the human voice to be there in a room with someone who's singing at you. And so the spatialization of the sound that's possible in VR is the best way to experience that. If you're in your VR space and you can actually tell where the sound is coming from, that's really, really exciting.
At first, I was not the world's biggest horror opera fan, or opera fan in general. And then when I actually got in the space when we were shooting it, I could hear the slicing of the knives around me. I could see the watchers around me. I found myself suddenly becoming a convert because the space just reverberated the sound of the really talented opera singers that we have.
A lot of what's being done is demo-y, is more focused on the visuals rather than the character development. And what I really love about this piece is that we've got great protagonists, we've got conflict, we've got mystery, we've got an excuse for an audience to tune back in and see what happens. And that, I think, is a unique thing in this VR world right now.
Our director, Carrie-Ann Shim Sham, gives a speech this morning. She says, first rule is have fun. The second rule is if your fun gets in the way of someone else's fun, take your fun somewhere else. And then the third rule is safety. I was like, all right, safety third! We're doing it!
Opera horror VR, oh my God. People would hear the idea and go, oh my God, that's so cool. That's amazing. And that's when I knew that it was something special because of the way other people reacted about it.
Well, that's exciting. I would love to have Anne come back on screen with us now, and we'll talk about this. So, you know, as a producer for Parksville Murders, and as we heard you say a little bit about just now in that fantastic behind the scenes video, you know, how did Opera on Top get to this as where you were going with producing? What was the impetus, and just, you know, share a little about your VR and your AR projects.
Well, I think it really started first with wanting to do a horror piece. Like, you know, I was really excited by the idea of kind of creating some sort of sorority horror type piece that would be, originally we were thinking, let's create something that we could put, you know, into a space with 4 or 5 rooms and the audience walks through, kind of akin to the venues that Opera on Tap normally and traditionally had always worked in. And it just happened that we were having these conversations at a time where we were also talking to some people who are working in film, and Carrie-Ann, who ended up directing the piece, actually suggested, like, why don't you put this into VR? And from there, we really just kind of dug in and discovered what VR was. I mean, not for everybody, just for ourselves. And, you know, so it really was sort of an organic thing that really came out of first the horror idea. And then second, okay, so we can put it like this and bring it to a bigger audience, which really aligns well with Opera on Tap's mission of engaging audiences, you know, in their own environments, in intimate experiences in different and new ways. So it really kind of jived, and we had a great opportunity to work. Carrie-Ann is also a professor at NYU Tisch, so that really opened up a lot of connections in terms of people working in VR and AR, and it really grew from there.
That's awesome. So we've got some slides to be able to reference in talking about immersive opera. And one of the things that we talked about coming into this was what's happening and changing in the world in response to access to this particular platform or platforms, but the points of access in particular that Kamala was addressing, as far as people being able to access this from home and what's changing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first off, the platforms by which VR gets distributed, are similar to Netflix. It's where people have a membership and they can download new content from the same place and upload it to their headset. So that allows for global distribution. And in our case, we were lucky enough to get a partnership with Samsung very early on, and so they featured us, which got us much larger audiences for our launch of this piece on their platform. So that was really eye-opening. I mean, in the first 2 weeks, we had over 14,000 people experience it. And beyond that, it's now been seen, I think, close to 42,000 times across different platforms where we have it up. So of course that's really exciting, and especially as we move into it being adopted more by consumers, we can monetize these experiences per download, and that's increasingly becoming the case. Especially this year, there has been like a big rise in VR use during the pandemic, even among people. I mean, new purchasers. It kind of aligned at the same time that Facebook and Oculus released their second version of their headset. That's a standalone headset that is $299. So that's a much more accessible price. And you don't need to tether it to a computer or a phone to make it work. It's basically like you put the headset on and you can do all kinds of interactive experiences. So you're not just, you don't have a narrow amount of content. You can kind of experience a huge array of the content that's out there. So that's really exciting for those of us who are working in VR. And just some sort of overall thoughts about where this industry is growing and its growth and potential. And I think, people who are investing are thinking 10 years in terms of long-term investment with this product. And right now they're at this phase of, it's a B2B solution. That's where they're seeing, industry is embracing it for workforce training, for healthcare. Education has become a big rising component for VR. Thinking about, I'm looking at my own stats here. The AR too has really seen a really exciting jump in retail specifically because, all these retail companies are realizing we can't have, the shops as much anymore, but people can try it. There's no reason why they can't try on clothes virtually,
Right.
before they purchase it. So that's been really interesting to see rise. And I think, in terms of entertainment, that is rising all over the place this year. I mean, they've seen a huge increase in terms of people who were already having headsets, but were not. Retention used to be a challenge. Like when we first did this piece in 2016, we were told you can't do something longer than 10 minutes. And, our biggest challenge and what we want to see is if you can keep people in a headset for more than like 5 minutes. And now retention is like increased twofold. I mean, anecdotally speaking, myself as somebody who has a headset, I have been obsessed with these kind of problem-solving games, and I can spend hours in it. Like the comfort level has gotten better, the experience itself, the view, the screen is much more high resolution, so it's not hard on the eyes. So I think it's moving at a breakneck speed, and like that's very interesting to see how increasingly it will be, accessible on that level. And also there's a lot of talk in the tech industry about how 5G is really going to propel VR and AR forward because it will allow for much faster downloads and uploads speeds. So that's going to be a huge deal for some of the content that's much more interesting and interactive for that to become more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even know that I know what the difference really is about 4G and 5G, other than it appeared on my phone recently. But I can understand that when I'm switched over to that, the speed at which things move is so amazing and exponential. I can only imagine that it helps enhance, especially if you're talking about imagery and sound. And also we'll get into, I'm sure, the discussion about latency and some of the other things that can prove challenging, but not completely. Do you want to keep talking a little
and
bit
I should
about
also mention too that, because
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding with the 5G, you have to have a 5G enabled phone to really get the benefits of it. So that begins with like the iPhone 12 and the Samsung Galaxy most updated version and the Google Pixel, like the most recent ones are the ones that are capable at this point.
Yeah, I don't remember which one I have. It's the Samsung something. But yeah, the ones that have been released in the last year, they automatically come, even if you don't have a 5G network, they come ready to be 5G enabled. I'm sure they'll find a way to charge us for that when they're able to.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to talk a little bit more about your about Parksville, and then by compare and contrast Joan of the City?
Kamala, I don't know if you want to, I was going to talk a little bit about where it's going, because I think that that is also a really interesting experience, like having been sort of like pioneers building this piece back in 2016, watching the industry just, it's like the Wild West, because nobody really knows, what's going to be the thing that takes and like becomes the massively consumer adopted, killer app, whatever you want to say. So it's really, watching how its phase and its evolution has kind of affected what we're thinking in terms of where we want to take this project. And I think it's going to end up in this environment of we're using VR, we're using live performance, we're using AR, and we're using site specificity, because those are all things that will work with these technologies and kind of create a different operatic experience.
Which brings up another term, which is MR, mixed reality, where you're using different bits of each of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just gave us more new acronyms, MR. Okay. So and just anytime and you built the deck, let us know if you want to advance to the next image in here. I went ahead and went to the Parksville one. So this is in 360. You do need a VR lens to look at and watch Parksville, yes?
The Parksville Murders is also a 360 video, so you can
Okay.
watch it on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can consume it in both places.
Though you won't get the same spatial audio experience on YouTube as you get in the headset.
Okay. I have one of those cool
Yes.
paper ones that the New York Times sent me. Will it work in that one?
Yeah, it
Okay.
should, yes. With the phone, as long as you have the phone.
Great. I will do that. Excellent.
I think too, what's been interesting, and if Jerry Dye were here, he would probably go further into this, but, building a storyline around something that has multiple different types of narrative components is a really interesting and fun new experience for us. So he sort of has developed this origin story of what's happening in Parksville. And that is always sort of the thread that ties all the different types of performances we're putting together. So, beyond just watching something in a VR headset, which is sort of a dimension of its own, there's also a dome experience, which we were actually getting ready to present one of our dome experiences at the Opera America conference in Seattle. So that continues to be something we really want to play around with is this idea of pop-up exhibitions and, kind of happening upon some kind of presentation that leads to clues as to what's happening in Parksville. And that also allows us to bring the project beyond Parksville, right? Like we can take it to multiple cities and it will still kind of align with the thread of the project. And then we have this kind of big, this idea of a summer experience in the town of Parksville, or the hamlet, I should say, of Parksville, which is in the Catskills, not far from the town of Liberty, I think is its parent city. In which, people will be able to walk around and will get kind of pick up AR clues on their phones, like about what's happening and happen upon live performance, as well as come to these centers within the village where they'll be able to experience AR and VR experiences as well. So that's sort of the end game for it. This is where the thread leads. And currently what we're working on right now is this idea as a VR portal for this experience, which will house basically any cinematic content we create. People will be able to go into this space, which we're calling the Shrine, and enter into different episodes about the Parksville story and learn more about what's happening there and what's happening to these women. As well as interact with the space itself, really utilizing what VR already allows us to do, tactile experiences, sonic experiences, voice triggers that actually trigger an action in the space is something that we're really excited to kind of keep building.
That's so cool. And we will get to do the dome. So help me as we go forward.
I wanted jump in and just underline one more thing about this piece, which is that when Jerry and I were talking about how to make an opera for VR, the central component that we had to figure out was what is the role of the audience if they're plunked down into the center of this experience. And so this directly led to the backstory and world building of Parksville, which is that you're in a horror situation. So you're watching these young sopranos, and they're like all sopranos, getting killed. So what is your role? And since you as the viewer are really immersed in the middle of all of it, it was important to sort of, talk about the gaze of the viewer and how that has historically been linked to problematic experiences for women. And so that becomes the central point of the opera, in that we are taking the form itself to make it an integral part of the storytelling, and also to sort of talk about something that we as a society need to be having a conversation about.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm going to pause. I want to bring John in and talk a little bit about Miranda. And then I want to talk for all these projects, and maybe we'll show some of the slides about Joan when we get into community engagement influencing these stories and how we utilize that. But hi, John. So, going forward into this was a big leap for Tri-Cities to take on Miranda. And, I just want to have you share a little bit about why you chose this creative direction for your company, and then and I think you might be on mute, and then start to address some of the challenges that came out with this. And tell me when you're ready, and we'll show you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would be happy to talk a little bit about that. So Miranda for us was a pandemic solution. We came to virtual reality as an option about 2 weeks after I had to fire every person who works for me in the middle of March of last year, which was super scary. And thankfully, thanks to the PPP and federal help and all that good stuff, and our amazing, incredible donors and patrons and board members, we have everybody back, which is exciting. But it was our solution to find a way to produce safely and still give a live experience to our audience. So I think one of the key differences between the projects you've heard about so far and Miranda is that ours was streamed and broadcast live from the Tri-Cities Opera Center in Binghamton for 9 performances over 3 days. So it is not something that has lived on, because it was it lives on YouTube, but as far as the full VR experience, it was only available during those performances. But basically, a very good friend of mine who runs a festival that deals in the intersection of arts, technology, and storytelling, had this idea to use the Unity platform, as Kamala mentioned, as an immersive live theater storytelling platform. And so we kind of decided what we wanted to do, came to Kamala's piece pretty quickly in the process. And we did go through quite a process in adapting it from a 75-minute opera down to about a 20-minute opera, keeping key elements, but obviously making some changes. But it was envisioned really, basically, the vision was to keep our performers safe, to keep people working. In September of last year, we had a team of 24 people working for 3 weeks in Binghamton on an opera, in person, safely. Nobody got COVID. And part of the way we achieved that was using the technology to isolating people, and then using the technology to bring them back together in the space of the show.
Tell us a little bit, one of the questions I wanted to ask was, in terms of collaborative opportunities for this, talk a little bit about what new doors got opened for you there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this project was, Tri-Cities Opera is in Binghamton, New York. It is a city of 46,000 people. It's a very small city. However, we are entering our 72nd season. Taking on this process from start to finish was a 6-month process. So it was very quick and exciting. But we needed help along the way. And so we were able to partner up with this festival in Binghamton, which has a wonderful reach and is a real economic driver for our community, along with the arts. And then we were partnered with Enhance VR, which is a virtual reality company. We worked with video game designers in both Brazil and Argentina on this project, doing remote meetings. And then in the opera world, we were able to bring on Opera Omaha as a collaborator for this production, which really seeded a beautiful new relationship. And actually, currently our companies are working together on a film that we're shooting in New York, a new version of La Boheme. These sort of these leaps of faith, these explorations into the new and exciting and different, we don't always know where they're going to go. But I think part of what we have to be doing as arts administrators and creators is being willing to take those risks and those steps forward to find what works and to find what's the next thing. What is we didn't know where the support was going to come from when we decided to do this, but it did show up, and we were able to figure it out. So I don't recommend doing everything without knowing how you're going to find the support, but sometimes a calculated risk pays off. And for Tri-Cities Opera, again, a small opera company in a small city, we received a New York Times review, which hasn't happened to us in probably 30 years or so. Wow. We had attention from Forbes magazine, Opera America, various channels that really helped raise the profile of our company. And then we were able to leverage that in the future with additional digital programming over the last 6 months.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, I think we're ready to go. So
Okay,
let's
cool.
go. Let's watch some video, and then
Cool.
we'll come back to this discussion once people get a taste of what Miranda really is.
The viewing public, welcome to the home of truth.
Awesome. That's your trailer. That's very
Yeah.
sexy. Not gonna
I'm
lie.
pretty sure I'm pretty sure the trailer really inspires a lot of questions and curiosity, honestly. And what you'll see is the opera was animated, and that was the way. So the process to create this, and I think there are some photos somewhere, I don't know if they're available, but there were we created, so it was a small cast of 5. We had some pre-recorded characters, but the 3 principal characters were live, and they were each isolated in. So again, this was envisioned before we had any real knowledge of what COVID was, how long it would be, or what would be safe, what kind of rehearsal practices would be possible. So we actually created 3 sort of isolation cubicles where each singer who was a live performer was performing. They were in motion capture suits with facial recognition cameras on them, with earpieces, with the orchestra streaming to them, and mic'd up with live sound mixing. So we went from traditional opera is not amplified. We don't even deal with sound, but we went from the regular opera tech to one of the most high tech endeavors I think we, or maybe any company, has attempted sort of in this realm. So it was a big learning curve.
You want to show the motion capture?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Let's cue the film for that.
Sure. cut it off there. It's
Okay.
just some, yeah. So there you saw, I mean, we had our singers in helmets with basically it was an iPhone sort of positioned in front of their face, similar to the technology that is used when you do like an emoji and animate an animal or, you know, or your own emoji or memoji on iPhone. That was the technology we used to track the facial movements. And we had our motion capture suits were from Denmark. They were new. We had some trouble, but it's okay. We figured it all out. I will say one of the things that was interesting in this process, you know, again, start to finish, 6 months. It was very, very quick. One of the things I would recommend to anybody considering sort of diving into tech like this is to give yourself a lot of time, leave room for working through glitches and things like that. We had announced our dates pretty early in the process, and we're going through a very intensive sort of, we probably could have used a little more time. But that being said, we eventually kind of came around to really the concept that this was a beta test, and it absolutely was. We leveraged the resources and pushed them sort of to the max of what they could do, given, you know, there's so many challenges. We mentioned that. Actually, I want to just stop on this picture. So what was one of the really exciting things about this project is we had a wonderful female production team almost entirely. And so there's Kamala, composer, Allison Moritz, who was the director, Anna Warfield was the production manager from the Luma side of things, the festival side of things. And then Danielle was our production stage manager, and Cindy, lots of great people. Cindy Marino was our production manager. I got to shout to them all. And Cricket Myers was our sound designer. It was such a great team, and everything was really, really well executed by that team. I mean, when you're exploring things like that, there are always challenges like this new tech, but we really came together to make it work. So it was exciting. It really
That's
exciting
awesome.
project.
Do you want? I think, is it the next slide that this gives us? So these are your character models, and then I think you see the booths.
Yeah, so this is basically the process we went through. So we designed these characters from scratch. They came from Allison's head, our director. Well, based on descriptions, of course, from the script and what we knew about them and from the music and whatnot. But we started with a sketch, then we took it to sort of a full drawing, and then the silver version you see is it's a fully realized 3D model. So that positioning is sort of the resting position of these models, and every piece of that model moves. And then basically we added the skin of sort of what you see previously to the left to the model to create these moving 3D sort of, in essence, this is kind of what a Pixar movie is, except for we were doing it live, which, you know, as we mentioned earlier, latency, sort of delay between sound and lags and whatnot was a challenge. I mean, simply streaming, motion capture data for body, motion capture data for face, sound data, streaming all of those things, it was very challenging, given bandwidths and whatnot, to make that all work and keep the quality high. And looking at this slide, actually, this was Miranda's world. And if you noticed in the trailer, we were in this sort of blimp, and you could see a post-apocalyptic New York City, which we drew from scratch. We had a designer, again in Argentina, create this for us. And what was kind of cool is the blimp that you're in was this image looped around the blimp in panorama. So you looked out the window and you always saw something, and the airships moved. It was just fun and interactive. And again, as Kamala said, the world building was a really important piece. And we have Miranda's home. This is the staircase, the infamous scene of the crime. One of the things that's really cool about this technology is, I mean, the level of detail you can create in these worlds is spectacular. And I think we would have loved to flesh that out more and let people explore those worlds. But when it came down to sort of time to put this together, we had to sort of show it off from one vantage point as opposed to letting people walk through everything. And here, these are our motion capture cubicles. So you'll notice they're just big boxes, and everybody except those singers were masked to keep keep people safe. We had very strict COVID protocols in place for this whole process, temperature checks, testing weekly, really efforts to make sure everybody was safe, because as important as it was to produce this product, the health and safety of our artists and our team was of the highest importance. One thing, actually, back to that picture, but can we go back one slide? One of the things that's really cool, so you'll see pink carpet. What is that doing in a motion capture studio? You'll see there's a little set back there. The Tri-Cities Opera Center is actually a 100-year-old building. It's on the National Historic Register, and I thought it was so exciting to bring like the forefront of technology to an old place and fuse those things together. I think that's very much the future of Tri-Cities Opera, not necessarily virtual reality, but finding the ways to embrace the legacy of our art form and our company, the good parts of the legacy of our art form and our company, and bring them into the future and marrying them to all the good that is happening right now. So it was a really exciting leap forward for our company into that world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm gonna bring Anne and Kamala back on screen, but in particular, the $1 million question, of course, has been asked in the chat, which is, what did it cost to produce this? So, and I would love for you and Annie as producers to talk about that. And you just hit on the idea of, we know what it costs to produce a main stage, opera in that space. Talk about what it costs to produce this. Were there surprises? Were there things that you really had to focus on for investment? And then what's the trade-off?
Absolutely.
Comparison?
So when we approached this project initially, the festival, we were providing singers, we were going to provide a director, and we were going to provide basically the musical and theatrical side of it. Unfortunately, in the 6-month process, there was a 6-figure funding pull from the project due to the pandemic that threw us into chaos for a moment. But I was really determined to move this forward. I had a very good feeling about the importance of this piece and what it could maybe inspire some people to do. And so at that moment, we moved forward and looked for funding partners and recognized that, especially in these digital realms, we don't have to broadcast locally. We don't have to only appeal to our local audience. And so I began talking to and approaching companies all over the country. I don't necessarily want to get into exact budgetary figures because I think companies are so different scale-wise. It's not necessary wouldn't necessarily be helpful to say exact numbers, but I will say for about a third to a half of what we normally spend on a production, we were able to reach about 5 times the audience, which that's huge. That's huge for us. And especially in the midst of this scary moment of darkness in our industry in some ways, it was important for us to just let as many people know as possible that we're still working, we're figuring it out, and we're not gone.
That's awesome. Mark, did you have a question you wanted to jump in with?
I actually do, and I realize we're bumping up against time here. Kamala, you said that one of the great joys of being in the theater experience is to be in the room with a voice. For me, one of the joys is being in the room with the other people who are listening to the voice. And I just wonder if you could, for a moment, address the collective experience that is opera and how it intersects with the virtual reality and the headset.
Sure. I mean, I think what's interesting is once you get into these emerging technologies, you enter into other cultures of social interaction also, which I'm sure you're all experiencing now. That part of the gaming world is the chat. So we didn't have it enabled for Miranda, but the app Discord actually emerged so that people could talk to each other while they were streaming their video games. And now the culture is, if you're watching some kind of a live stream video, then you chat on the side. I don't think that that's where we want to end up, but I do think that social VR is something that is definitely improving. There are already social VR hubs like AltSpace VR, which Annie and I have spent some time in. I think that that's somewhere where we could go. Those spaces right now are not really built for live performance. You'll see musical performances in social VR that tend to be DJ sets, so people will play a set of songs rather than performing live. But I do think that's what we all want, is to find a way to come together because of that community aspect of it. And I also think that's why augmented reality actually seems to be the way that most theater companies and other types of arts that do rely on people being in a space together are moving more in that direction than in VR, because of course in VR you have the headset that really totally immerses you, so other people have to be in the same VR space that you're in, whereas in augmented reality, because it's mapping onto the place that you're actually in, there can be other people there. And actually that's sort of the project that Annie and I are working on now, Joan of the City, is very much about having groups of people moving together through the piece.
Wow. Thanks, Kamala. Really great to hear.
Thanks everybody for being here for the first part of the discussion. The second part of this discussion, I'm so thrilled to have a great friend, colleague, and mentor from the field, Francesca Zambello. She's artistic director for the Washington National Opera and general and artistic director for the Glimmerglass Festival. Francesca, thank you for coming to talk to us about this amazing VR project that you are doing in Washington. Tell us a little bit about Fidelio.
Sure. Thanks, Laura Lee. It's great to be here with you and friends at Opera America. Well, this year, obviously, like everybody else, we came up with a sort of what was our plan for the whole year, as we realized more and more that there was no way we would be producing. And what would have been the opening opera of our season was Beethoven's Fidelio. And of course, the most famous aria from the piece is Leonora's aria, Komm Hoffnung, Come Hope. So we entitled our entire season under this kind of umbrella of Come Hope and all the projects that we're doing. And we decided we wanted to do projects that range from what I call like guerrilla opera, street opera, opera truck, books for kids. We made a thing called Slopera with Mo Willem, to, concerts, embassy appearances, videos that we created with Ryan McKinney and Janae, and then to a more sort of high-end tech level, which was VR. We wanted to experiment with VR. VR is potentially the closest thing to being there live, visually and audio. And so we decided to use two arias from Fidelio, Florestan's aria Welche Dunkel here, which she sings in the cell, and then Leonora's Komm Hoffnung, but to treat them really as individual kind of little mini stories, like a penny Victorian novel, where you would have a 10-minute story within an aria, rather than knowing where the aria is set in the context of the piece if you had never seen the piece. Since we thought, well, who's going to watch VR? We don't know. Is it our audience? Is it donor subscribers? Is it a kid who has an Oculus, or the gaming platforms possible to see this? So we worked with a company called Time Looper, who have made VR. They've basically focused on world sites, the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the London Eye, and filming a VR experience of visiting them. And so we explained to them what we wanted to do with these and shoot them really as kind of narrative 10-minute pieces, which they completely understood and came on board with us. And so we began the process of working out how to record it, audio, before filming, which, as it turns out, because of contractual things with our orchestra, the contract wasn't settled. That many people couldn't gather in Washington. So we're recording the orchestra later with our conductor, our music director, Evan Rochester. And we recorded these with piano tracks, which then were like guide tracks for everyone. We were very fortunate to have two wonderful artists, Tammy Wilson as Leonora and Russell Thomas as Florestan. And so we then embarked with these people, with Time Looper, on a new kind of way of doing something. For everybody, it was new. Them, for us, filming in VR. And I also just want to give a shout out to Annie Burridge and her company, Austin Opera, that they partnered with us. But we then filmed everything in Washington, and we've just finished doing that, and we're editing it. And I think I'm happy to talk about the process, but I think for people, often in our business, and we've all experienced this, when people come in the rehearsal room who are not normally there, and they feel the palpable, like physical pressure of having someone sing near you, it's overwhelming. And that is definitely what it feels like hearing something in VR. And then, of course, seeing it, you are seeing, the easiest way to describe it is 360.
Yeah.
That you are, in a sense, you are in the middle of something. And so we had to work out with them. This is sort of the logistical beginning. This is the set for the cell. I didn't want it to feel like a prison, but rather something contemporary, like out of Homeland or The Americans. And that, it's important in VR, you have certain distances that you have to adhere to in terms of filming. Again, so different than when you're filming something with a regular, even single camera shoot or multi-camera shoot for an opera on the stage.
Right. And you're making this in this space. When you say they were coming in and being different people that were in the rehearsal room, nobody's seeing this. This is, they have to build this to put what they've recorded in the space into this environment. That's where the avatars are going to be, right?
No. Well, so we did not do this with avatars.
Oh,
we did it with real people, real filming in the space. It was a lot of VR does have that sense of an avatar against something that we would call a kind of green screen. I really wanted us to build a set, which we built these in our rehearsal room. It's a 15-foot square box. It's a real set. It doesn't have a roof or anything, which that we would put on in post-production. But so we filmed Russell in this set. And what's interesting about VR is that, everything is one take. You cannot, you don't make cuts the way you do in regular filming process. So in this instance, it's a 10-minute take of an aria. So this is just the ground plan of the set, which everything generally needs to be 3 to 5 feet away, or you suddenly start to get distorted. And then I think, let's see what else is there. So once we had worked out the technical dimensions and how to get light into the space, again, that kind of lighting is very much like film lighting in terms of what sources you're using. And these cameras are so sensitive because they are literally filming. It's like having a camera octopus with 360 eyes all around. Actually, there's 8 cameras inside of the camera. It looks sort of like a thing that's landing on the moon. Anyway, so this is what the cell, the design of the cell ended up looking like. But then, of course, you have to examine all 360 degrees of it. Same thing in the kitchen. I think if you go to the next image, this was the ground plan for the kitchen. Again, it was really, you can see, this was another 15 by 15 foot square where there is a level of green screen, which you can see a cityscape outside. This is a rendering of it. But again, you need to have, again, a set that is 360 degrees, not unlike a film in that sense, but again, with the distances, because you put the camera in the room. Normally if you're making a film, you would take the wall off of that room and you would be shooting in, but here the camera is living inside of the room. So these are more images of the kitchen where we filmed it. It has a contemporary feeling. It was very much the idea was that she is in the kitchen here of her own kitchen. And the story that we told here was she has learned that Florestan is incarcerated, and she makes, using the aria to tell the story, that she makes a decision to dress as a man. So she changes dresses, and runs out of her kitchen. The idea is they're really two, really, I would say, freedom fighters together. We modeled Florestan's character somewhat on, he could have been a black pastor. and that Tamara Leonora was his wife, pictures of the kids on the refrigerator and all those kind of details. So it was really, it's a great experience with two great American artists, and the audio, I think, is going to be amazing, as is the visuals and the storytelling of it.
That's fantastic. And it's just sort of vignettes. It's those two arias. They're like a 10-minute, VR experience. So how can your audience consume this? Do they have to have the big Oculus goggles? Can you do it with is there a 2D? Is there what's your distribution consumption plan?
Right. So these are like 2 episodes. They go together. They segue. Sort of when she runs out of the door, then the next thing you see is you're in the prison, and she is there as a guard with a character who might be Pizarro. If we make another episode, and is trying to get Florestan to sign something. He won't do it. The guard leaves, and then he's in the cell, and then he does the aria in the cell, and recalls various things about their life together.
Mm-hmm.
For distribution of this is, I think, the thing that everybody is examining as we look at how to use VR. Oculus glasses are a couple $100.
Yeah.
They are definitely the best way to view this. And so what we would be doing from Washington is we're working out for our donors and subscribers a deal where we send you a link, and you just put it into, your Oculus. So, you click on it and in your Oculus, and you can watch it and hear it. The audio will be recorded in the coming weeks once the orchestra can fully gather. So the orchestra will be recorded, and then the voices will be dubbed in with that. So you can also, there are also processes now where you can take the VR film and transform it to watch onto an iPad. It is still a 360-degree experience. It is not like watching something from an Oculus. If you have never looked at something through an Oculus, try it. It's completely, takes you to another place. It's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And it is really like being inside of the room with the artist in this case.
Yeah.
So it will be available through the Oculus, or we will then also make it available through other channels.
Okay, you also were kind enough to share this really cool sort of video that gives us that sense of the room. So let me pull that up, because I would love for people to be able to see it really quickly, what this looks like. And tell us, you talked about the camera space in there, as far as how you shot this.
Right. So this is just different angles of the cell. You can see here, this is sort of, this was an outside view in. It ended up that we ended up placing the camera over by that beam on the right of the screen, because that got the biggest view of the room. And that's why here, what you're working out, this is like a set model equivalent, working out where the best camera view is going to be able to capture the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Time Looper, company run by Andrew Feinberg, whose team was an amazing team of artists from France and Turkey. So it was a very kind of international thing, which was great, doing a piece that has such political resonance, obviously in America now. As we are facing many issues, it's important to do a piece like this, but also to have dialogue with international artists as well. So those are the kind of technical things, but this is not like other VR experiments where people are working with avatars or animated things. We really wanted to film in VR with real people and have that experience. And so, again, it's an experiment. It'll be ready like within a month, and then we'll be able to distribute it, and everybody will be able to try it. And I think it's going to be thrilling. And I think it's going to be really thrilling, just because the process and the technology, but also having real people who are singing with that incredible heart. And, Tammy and Russell are wonderful actors and interpreters and storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, it's a gift to have them. They were naturals for the camera. And, we did a lot of work of like camera blocking and how to get closer to the camera, how not to be close, how to focus to the lens and not focus to the lens. Because it's very different than like when you're doing an HD or when you're filming an opera.
Right. Now, I know it hasn't come out yet, And it's an experiment, which is a really cool experiment and I'm excited about. But you know, you're a really experienced director in looking at how things you have tried in the past, and you've done a lot of experimental things that then have become a part of like your lexicon at the companies that you've been in charge of and places where you've worked. Do you see this, where do you see this playing in your future? You know, is this going to become an awesome, you know, marketing tool where you do a pre-show teaser that gets people in the door, or are there whole operas that could fit into this structure? The serial issue of like putting it out. What's your future vision on this?
Well, I mean, I think that we're all learning we're learning a lot of lessons during COVID. Of course, it's creating for many of us how to do new things, how to, you know, so many of us have become like suddenly we're like video producers all the time. So I do think that this at home experiencing opera is going to stay with us. I have been a pretty firm believer in the last year in creating content that is short, that's half an hour or less, because I think people's attention spans looking at a screen really, it's just they don't take in a whole opera. The way that, like, you know, when you experience HD, you're in a theater, it's huge. Or when you remember when we used to get like PBS would do an opera, we'd be like so excited, you know. So I think that this kind of shorter bites is going to be something that I think will stay with us. I think technology and how we use it is going to stay with us. I do think that finding ways to make it feel like live is really important, because that's what people love about the theater. And obviously, of course, working in any form of film or technological enhancement to what we do, of course, creates another level of you know, interpretation and how we do something. So I don't think any of this is going to go away. It's all going to be about numbers and paywalls and what people want. And, you know, are we reinterpreting the masterpieces, or are we writing new repertory? And that was like interesting for me, was that I know some people have been writing pieces for VR, but I was like, I said, let's try what happens when we use our sort of our classics. And I think that there's room for all of this.
Yeah.
And I think, again, after COVID, we will really be assessing, what does attending a live performance mean? This is a big discussion. It's not for this, but you know,
we're going to do a whole session on that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I do think that working with other means of transmitting this art form are going to stay with us. And I think that the palpable excitement of live is not going to go away, but we're going to be seeking for ways to capture it, to bring it closer to people.
That's a great summary of where we need to be going. And this, I hope that this experiment is as fulfilling as it looks like from what you all have been able to start to do with it. I'm really eager to see what happens with it next. Thank you so much, Francesca, for taking some time to talk with us about this. And I can't wait to see these two pieces from a classic piece in the repertoire that I myself adore. So, and wonderful artists.
Well, all of us at Washington National Opera, including my wonderful general director, Tim O'Leary, and I thank you, Laura Lee, for letting us tell you a little bit about it.
Awesome. Well, I feel a whole lot smarter after that discussion, but mostly I'm aware of how much more there is to learn and experience about this amazing new part of the opera world. Thank you again to Kamala, to Anne, to John, and Francesca for sharing your time with us, for your exceptional creativity and perseverance this year. And we wish you all the very best with each of your company's work for this coming year. If you'd like to learn more about these exciting projects, there will be some links in the closing slide at the end of this presentation. Make sure to copy and paste those, and you can go search them out on your browser as you wait to see what happens next in the exciting world of VR for opera. Thanks again to all of you for spending this hour with us. And as always, it was my pleasure to be your host. Back over to you, Mark.
Laura Lee, thank you so very much for leading such a wonderful session. You're right, our panelists are brilliant in articulating the concepts and the vision of virtual reality in opera. Thank you, friends, for joining us this evening. I hope that you have a good evening and look forward to seeing you soon on another Zoom or hopefully in person. Take care.